We started a brand new series with you last week talking about family, and we kind of all agreed that we know a family, we come from a family, we have a family, and there are no normal families. Isn't that awesome to know? Because you're pretty sure you know that your family's not normal, but it's easy to think that everybody else's family is normal. But there are no normal families. Not even in the Bible there weren't even normal families. And we kind of went there a little bit last week, and we talked about that happy families seem to have forgiveness at the core and at the center, and to offer forgiveness into our families before they even know that they need to have forgiveness. Just offer that forgiveness, because that's what Jesus did for us. And so forgiveness is really, we know that forgiveness is easy in theory but difficult in practice, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more in the family setting as we go on today. Now, when it comes to family stuff, I'm going to make a couple of assumptions about your home. This doesn't matter if you're single and you live by yourself, or if you live in a whole big family, a traditional family, a blended family. And when we talk about blended family, we're talking about there's been a divorce or a death, and now there's a remarriage. But two assumptions I'll make about your family is this: not every home is a happy home. Would you agree with that? Okay, let's try that again. Not every home is a happy home. Would you agree? Say yes. The other assumption I'm going to make is every home wants to be a happy home. Would you say yes? Now, if you're single, you've got nobody to blame but yourself, right? Anyway, another assumption I'll make about families, and just about people in general is this: that in this room this morning, there might be somebody here that you just don't necessarily like. And what can make that even more challenging is they live in the same house as you do, right? And that could be a real challenge for us. Now, that just kind of goes on. It might be a spouse, it might be a sibling, we don't know, but maybe it's not even in the house. It might be an aunt or an uncle or a cousin, but there's somebody in the family that you just really struggle, and you're great as long as you're not with them. But the moment they come to the family gathering, the moment they walk into the house, the moment he walks into the house, the moment they start talking, whenever I hear his voice, all of these emotions come up on the inside of you, and nobody can see the war. Nobody can see the war between you, but you know the war within you. In fact, the other person in the family might think that there's nothing between you, but you feel this angst and this emotion every time you're around that person. And here's what goes on. When there's that person that bugs you, it might be in the family, might be outside of the family, in the workplace. I don't know what it is, but we know what would make everything better. We know what would calm the storm. We know what would stop the war. We know what it would take. And you know exactly what needs to change to make things better. Them, if they would change, if they would just change, everything would be better. Why can't they see these things in themselves? I mean, it's so obvious, the problems that they have. It's just so obvious. I mean, it's so obvious they're a slob, or they're selfish, or they're rude, or they're unthinking, or they're lazy, or they're thoughtless, or they can't keep a job because, and it goes on and on and on. And you get together at your family gatherings, and after you leave that place, you're sitting in the car talking to Doris, and you're just psychoanalyzing everybody in your family. Well, you know the reason he's like that. He got dropped when he was a child, I just tell you. I mean, so all of us psychoanalyze, and no one would ever, but and isn't it true that we think this, why can't they see this in themselves? And isn't it just coincidental that we don't really have any problems for anybody to talk about? Have you noticed that? I mean, if everybody was really more like us, there's just no reason to talk. In fact, if more people were like me, it would be a happier place. If people learned how to keep house the way I keep house, if they learned how to work like I work, if they would just learn how to fold laundry like I fold laundry, if they would wash dishes the way I wash dishes, if they would maintain their car the way, if they would manage their children the way I manage my children, the world would be a whole lot happier place. You ever notice that? But at the same time, while you've compared yourself that way to other people, have you also felt less than good enough? Have you ever felt like you've turned people's heads? That people have stared at you, that there's something about you that people just look down at you, and you've turned their heads, or maybe they've turned away from you, and the reality is they've just never heard your story. And all of us in this room have a story, but we don't always get a chance to tell our story, which explains the things that happen in our life. And what you really want and what I really want is the very same thing. I just want to be accepted and loved where I am. And in the family, how much more? Because when students know, when your spouse knows that they're just unconditionally loved, it brings such security and stability to the family. Now, the temptation you and I both face, I think, is I want to fix people. I don't want to accept them. I want to fix them. And if I can fix them first, then I will accept them. And here's what I know about you and about me and about everybody else. Nobody wants to be fixed. We just want to be accepted. Would you agree with that? We don't want to be fixed. Just accept us. Now, the tension I think I feel on the inside, maybe you feel on the inside, is this. Here's the tension I feel. I don't want to work on my issues, and I don't want to deal with your issues. Or, truth be known, I don't have any issues. They're all your issues, right? Now, Jesus has this very humorous and amazing way of addressing all of these things in any one of us. And he just uses some illustrations, some parables that really talk about our issues, if you want to say that. And I'm going to read to you some things that Jesus said in Luke chapter 6. Jesus was winning no friends with what he said. He's going to say some things that if you really want to read actually what he's saying in these things, he's not out to win any friends. Look what he says in chapter 6, verse number 39, the book of Luke. He asks this question. Here's the question. Can one blind person lead another? And the answer to that is no. And then he asks another one. Won't they both fall into the ditch? And the answer to that is yeah. So he's addressing people who want to follow him, and he's saying, can a blind guy lead another blind guy? I mean, I suppose they could if they wanted to, but they'll both end up in the ditch. In essence, what Jesus is doing in that very question that he asks is this. He's saying, you guys are blind. No, I'm not. Yeah, you are. No, I'm not. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Yeah. Jesus is saying, you have issues. No, you don't. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. He's going to build on it. Look what he says in verse 40. Students are not greater than their teachers. But in fact, the student who is fully trained will become like the teacher. Well, now he's calling us a student. And isn't it true that most of us don't want to be a student? We want to be the teacher. We want to be the one that tells other people how they should live their life, how they should manage their money, how they should manage their children, how they should manage their mouth, how they should manage their habits. We want to be the one that's teaching other people. We don't want to be the student. And if you're a man, you especially don't want to be a student because, man, we've got pride. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do, you know? And it just kind of goes that way. And we might even start out talking to people with this state. Well, let me tell you, here's the right way to do it. And now he asks us another question. He says this in verse 41. And let me ask you one more question. Why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you've got a log in your own eye? Now, Jesus is not out to win friends with all of these questions. In fact, what Jesus has done, he's just called us a blind student with a log in our eye. That's what he said. You're a blind student with a log in the eye. You guys have issues. Don't deny that you have issues. He's telling me that we're really no better than the family member that just drives us nuts. Do you have a family member that drives you nuts? You know, family's a little bit like fudge, isn't it? Mostly sweet, but a few nuts on the inside, right? And why you'd put nuts in fudge in the first place, I don't know. But we all got nuts in the fudge, right? And that's just our family. But he asks us this question, why do you worry about that speck in their eye? It's a great question. You ever thought about that? Because, see, it might not be a family member, but there's somebody that just annoys you. They hurt you, and you know what? You want to change them. You want to fix them. And Jesus says, why? Why do you worry about that stuff? Why do you spend all of this negative emotional energy thinking about and planning ways to change them or fix them? It's a good question for all of us. So we got to think about that. I don't know why. I think I do know why. Because if I fix your problems, that fixes my problems. See, I don't have issues. My issue is you. So if you deal with your issues and fix your issues, my issues go away. So Jesus now, he's got another question for us in verse 42. Another question. He says, look, how can you think of saying, hey, friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? It's a great question, isn't it? I don't know if you've ever gotten something in your eye. In fact, I do know. You've all gotten something in your eye. And as soon as you get something in your eye, what are you thinking about? Get this out, right? Just get it out. That's all we can think about. That's where the focus is. We just want to deal with this issue. I don't care about the speck in your eye right now. I got a log in my eye. Get it out. Just get it out. Verse 42, now Jesus is getting really personal. Look at what he says here in verse 42. You hypocrite. Isn't it interesting that when you talk to people outside of the church, they'll say people inside of the church are hypocrites? Do you know who they're quoting when they call us hypocrites? They're quoting Jesus. Jesus was the first one that called church people hypocrites. So they're quoting Jesus. But you have to understand what Jesus is saying. Look what he says, hypocrites. He says, look, first get rid of the log in your own eye, and then you'll be able to see enough to deal with the speck in your own eye. A hypocrite was just an actor. It was somebody who was one person off of the stage and another person on the stage. What Jesus is really saying, I think, here is you act like you've got it all together. You act like everything is perfect and good in your life. On the surface, when people get to see you on Sunday morning for that hour and 15 minutes while the pastor blabs away, people look at your life and looks like you've got it all together. But the moment you get out in the car, reality hits out in the car, doesn't it? Reality was in the car on the way to church. Jesus says, look, not everybody's got it together. We all have our issues. And so then he calls us these hypocrites. And you got to ask yourself, well, how do we get it together? Jesus has kind of a gentle answer for us. He says, first you got to deal with your own issues. You got to get the log out of your own eye, and then you can deal with the issues in somebody else's life. And if we would just take some time to look at our issues, we would see that our issues are pretty much the same as everybody else's issues. They might manifest a little bit differently. They might come out in different forms, but we all deal with the same things in life, don't we? All of us want to be accepted. All of us sometimes feel lonely. All of us sometimes feel inadequate and insecure, under-equipped, ill-equipped, abandoned, forgotten, and we want to feel important and affirmed and valued. And all of us want to feel that way. It just comes out differently in people's lives. And if you're a blended family, Suddenly, you didn't get time to just, they say blended. I don't know if blended, it's more like they just collide. Here's my story. I was an only child until I was nearly 7 years old. If you're an only child here, we are special people. And my mom, I found out my mom was going to marry a man that had 4 children. One of those children was a boy. And I was so excited because I am going to have a brother. Yay! You know what brothers do together? You go fishing and you hang out, you go bike riding, you just have fun together. That was not the case at all. Let me show you a picture. This is my brother and I. I'm the handsome one on the right. Yeah. Isn't that awesome? This is taken, we'll just leave that picture up there for a little bit. This is taken back when I was about 8 years old, maybe 9, and he was 2 years older than I was. And it was our job to paint the garage. It was just a plywood garage, and Dad gave us oil-based paint. We got oil-based white paint, and we're painting the garage. I'll never forget, we had more paint in our hair than we had on the garage, and my mom working lard in our hair to get the paint out. Don't you love that story? But this guy on the left, that's my brother. His name in the family then was Charlie. His middle name was Delvane, so we called him Del. All his friends called him Stan because that was his first name, Stanley Delvane. So anyway, I was so excited to get this brother. But that brother had not been in the house very long in this blended family, and I realized I wish he were dead. In fact, at that very age, we shared a bedroom together. I had the top bunk, he had the bottom bunk. So mean to me was my stepbrother. I am serious with you. So mean to me was my stepbrother. I wanted to kill him. I remember walking home from Wilkinson Elementary School, and I could take you right to where the house is built today. And I'm walking with my brother, and he's got his friends. He's 2 years older than me. And they had just freshly dug the foundation. So we've got 8 or 10 feet just straight down to the bottom. There's no basement poured yet. It's just a big dirt hole in the ground. And my brother, wanting to impress his friends, puts his hand on my back and just shoves me ahead. And boom, I land in the bottom of that pit. And they all stood up there and laughed. That's the kind of stuff I endured. Come on, a little sympathy here. Let's get out the tissues. Thank you. Seriously, and this just went on and on and on. And I thought my brother had issues. But it wasn't until about 25 years after that picture was taken. My brother died from a brain tumor. And I realized a lot of conversations take place at funerals. And you learn things after a death of a person that you didn't know before. And you know what? My stepbrother didn't have issues. My stepbrother had a story. Because here's what happened to my stepbrother. After his dad, my stepdad, after his parents divorced, his mother was supposed to take care of him and his 3 sisters, and somewhere in some little motel in the middle of Montana, in the middle of nowhere, she just abandoned them in a hotel. Just left them. And somehow or the other, the hotel owner got a hold of my dad and said, I think there's some children here that belong to you. And he had to go out and pick them up. And so my stepbrother was never sure if he was ever loved or not. And he saw me, the only child of my mother, getting loved and doted on by my mom, which made him insanely jealous. But it wasn't until I was older that I really realized that. And you know, the other part of that story is this, right in the parking lot of this church, I could take you right to the location. Just weeks before my brother passed away, I remember leaning over the car, and he's suffering with this brain tumor, and they're trying to get rid of it, and it was really just inoperable. There's nothing they could do about it. And he said, Chris, I'm so sorry for the things that I did to you as a kid. In fact, I think sometimes this is God's punishment for the mean things I did to you when we were little. And I said, hey, oh, Del, no. I said, that was long ago forgotten and forgiven. Just forgive yourself and get over that. But isn't it too late that we realize people don't have issues? They've got a story. They don't always get to tell their story. Verse number 44, Jesus continues on the same train of thought. Look what he says. He says, look, a tree is identified by its fruit. Well, that would be like, well, yeah, that's kind of a duh statement. He says, figs are never gathered from thorn bushes and grapes are never picked from bramble bushes. And here, I think what Jesus is saying is, when you look at other people, let's not look for faults, let's look for fruit. Let's not look for faults, let's look for fruit. All of us have faults. Nobody has to point out our faults. And at the same time, all of us have fruit. There's value in our life. Nobody likes it when their faults are pointed out, but everybody loves it when their fruits are pointed out. When somebody comes alongside of you and encourages you, when somebody loves you and accepts you and hears you and loves you and listens to your story, when they embrace the fruit of your life, we all want that from ourselves. Why wouldn't we want that for other people? And the family is an amazing place to fertilize fruit trees. Mom and dad, spouses, listen. You can fertilize your children. You can fertilize your spouse. Here's how you do it. What gets rewarded gets repeated. What gets rewarded gets repeated, both in the good and the bad. You can fertilize thorn bushes too. Bad behavior also becomes repeated if it's rewarded. Just reward the fruits in your children's life. Here's the question that we really need to answer. How can I stop trying to fix others? How can I stop trying to fix others and not work on my own faults? Now, Jesus is going to get super, super personal. Because here's what we want to do. We want to fix other people. We're here in church this morning. We claim, yep, I love Jesus. Yes, I do. I love Jesus. How about you? You know, that whole kind of thing. We say we're a Jesus follower. But if other people would fix their stuff, I'd be a lot happier. So the question for us is this. How can I stop trying to fix others and only see their faults? Jesus has an answer that I think is really harsh. He kind of finishes up this whole thing on the thorn bushes and the trees and the speck in the eye and the blind leading the blind, that whole kind of thing. He kind of finishes up with saying this, look, you can't deny that you have issues in your life. And you want to fix other people's issues. So how do you deal with that? Look what Jesus says in verse 46. This is harsh. He says, I got a question for you again. I'm going to finish it. One more. Why do you keep calling me Lord, Lord? But you aren't willing to do what I say. I mean, you expect everybody else to deal with their issues when you tell them to deal with their issues. But you're not willing to deal with your issues when I tell you to deal with your issues. Oh, you come and say, yep, you're a follower, you love me, you're passionate about me. You even cry and have your hands raised in church on Sunday morning and you feel this emotional experience and there's a connection between you and God and you claim that you love me so much, but every time I put my finger on an issue and a place in your life that I think needs to change, no, but you're so quick to tell everybody else they need to change. Why do you do that? You can't call me Lord and not do what I tell you to do. Just imagine this. Now, this is just theory. We don't actually want to do this, but just imagine if we put as much effort working on our issues as we put on working on other people's issues. Now, I put this whole message together, and I listened to a couple scenarios to people who were close to me this last week. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, that's a great sermon, Pastor. Work on your own issues before you work on other people's. That's a great sermon, Pastor. But you come live in my house. You come live with my spouse, my parents, my kids, my ex, my extended family. You come live in my house for a little bit with my in-laws. And I'll tell you what you can do with your sermon. So what do we do with this? We've got to work on it somewhere. It's got to start somewhere. Let me share with you two short verses here, and then we're going to kind of wrap it up pretty soon. A guy named Paul writes this in Romans chapter 12 when he's dealing with interpersonal relationships. Look what he says in verse 18 of Romans chapter 12. Do all that you can to live at peace with everyone. You know what I love about that verse? Do all that you can to live at peace with everyone. You know what? You can't do for somebody else, but you can do for yourself. You can put out the olive branch. You can do certain things. You can put your best foot forward. You can step out. You can try to make peace and then put the ball in the other person's court. Because sometimes there won't be peace because they don't want it. But you at least have to make the first step. And then he follows that up in verse 21. He says, look, don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. You want to have a little fun with that verse? Insert somebody's name in there where it says evil. Don't let your father-in-law conquer you, but conquer your father-in-law by doing good, right? Or your mother-in-law, or your aunt, or your uncle, or whoever that name is in the person, you know? Doing good. Doing good to them first. Offering to them forgiveness. Realizing that you might have your own issues, making a decision just really to forgive. And here's what I know. We can pray one of two ways when we pray for somebody who really offends us, hurts us, somebody that we don't like, somebody that's irritating, somebody who's like the pebble in your shoe. Come on. We've all prayed this prayer. Oh God, let Uncle Bob get run over by a bus. Amen. Oh God, my mother-in-law, Jesus, let her be golfing in a lightning storm and just get connected with you somehow. I mean, we've prayed those prayers. We've prayed, oh God, just, let them have crooked teeth. I don't know, we prayed some prayer over somebody. Now, if you continue to pray that prayer, guess how you're going to feel about that person every time you see them? The same way. Or you can say, oh God, you forgave me of so much. I was a wretched wreck and a mess. And God, you stepped into my world and you accepted me right where I was. And God, thank you for changing my life. Now, God, help my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my sibling, my brother, my sister. God, help them encounter that amazing love of Jesus. Let them just feel the presence of God in their life. Bless them today in the workplace. Bless them at school. And your heart will begin to move that way. I'd say we just need to learn to forgive, and forgive isn't a feeling, it's a decision. The second thing we need to do is we just need to put on their shoes. Go walk in their shoes for a little bit. It's unfortunate that being so young, I didn't understand my brother's issues. I didn't understand his story. I'd never heard his story. But now when I put on my brother's shoes and walk in them and wonder about abandonment, and does anybody love me? I know why he was so angry. And there's that person in your life that just irritates you and angers you and they've hurt you time and time again. Put on their shoes. They've got a story. They don't have issues. They've got a story. And don't you wish Some people could wear your shoes and hear your story and understand you a little better. You might need to set some boundaries. You might need to stand up for yourself and say, you know what, when you say this, this is how I feel. Is that what you meant to say? Or you might have to say something like that, I don't deserve to be spoken to that way. It's just a boundary that you set for yourself. And then finally, you just got to say, I'm just going to choose to love that person. And love isn't a feeling. Love is an action. You might have to send them some flowers. You might have to buy them a gift card to a restaurant. You might have to do something for them that just says, you know what? I am choosing to overcome what I feel and act nice on your behalf. Because I don't want to look for the speck in your eye anymore. I don't want to worry about fixing you anymore. I just want to be accepted, so I want to learn to accept you. And let's just work towards that.